If you've been through trauma in the past and your sense of safety was completely destroyed, you might be out of that situation. You might not be around those people. That circumstance may be over and it might be way in the past. And cognitively, logically, you know you're safe. But your body, physiologically, you don't feel safe. So there's like this distinction between the mind and its perception and your neuroception, which is your ability of your nervous system, your inner self to perceive its perception of what is safe and what isn't. And they could be on two different pages. You might know you're completely safe. You have that logic in your mind, but your body doesn't believe you. So that's what I'm talking about. And this is the part that, especially in the West, in the States, mind and body are usually viewed separate. But when you really start understanding your body and how we're made, your autonomic nervous system, what happens is if you experienced trauma in childhood, right, which is any circumstance that was too much for your system, your nervous system, too much, too fast, too soon, and with no support. That's key. The not having support. In other words, you didn't have anyone to help you to work through what was coming up inside of you. If you had fear, there was no one there to kind of talk you through it. If you were being hurt and abused, you had nobody there to either defend and then to help you to reestablish a sense of safety inside with yourself and with the world. So what happens is that trauma creates a lot of intense emotions and a lot of intense fears, a lot of intense survival reactions. Your fight, flight, freeze are kicked on constantly. And without the support of what to do when that comes up in the body, your body chooses to stifle it because it's too much for your system. So all of that survival energy that was being provoked in you by the trauma, especially when that trauma, if it was ongoing, okay, that's a lot of survival energy that has come up in your body and had to be stifled just so that you could make it through your childhood. That trauma that came up and then got stifled is or was stifled in your body and it's still there. That's the hard part with trauma. We might physically grow and our bodies change. Our years pass and we get older, but trauma stays exactly intact, almost frozen. And it stays that way until we learn how to recover from that trauma. It's not something that heals with time. Time heals most wounds, not all wounds. It doesn't heal trauma wounds, just like physically. Our body has an innate way of healing itself physically. I just got over major poison ivy a couple of weeks ago, and my body healed itself on its own. I didn't have to do anything. Time healed that. But if one of my bones were broken, then just sitting there and doing nothing and letting time go by, yes, it might heal to an extent that the pain eventually goes away, but there's going to be some deformity. There's going to be consequences. It's going to show lasting side effects because time can't heal that kind of a wound, not in a healthy way. Well, it's the same thing with trauma. If you're wondering if you are still currently living with survival energy in your body, there are two things that usually take place. Now, these two things have a lot of subcategories, but the two things that you'll usually notice are one or the other. You are either in hypervigilance, which is also some of the subcategories could be you're very jumpy. Loud noises can cause you to jump. You never feel relaxed. You can be high with anxiety. You can snap really quickly emotionally. You can feel a lot of emotional triggers and go from one emotional state and flip and be in a completely different state as well. And you just don't feel grounded in your body. Okay. That's one of the things that can happen. The exact opposite can happen as well. And it all depends on your trauma response. Everyone has their own dominating personal trauma response of fight, flight, or freeze. The opposite of that would be complete shutdown. And this happens a lot if it was childhood trauma, because you think about it, fight or flight in childhood when you're undergoing chronic trauma is impossible. You're not, you're overpowered and you are at the disadvantage because you need help, right? You can't do things on your own. So you're stuck in that environment. And so your nervous system will say, okay, those two aren't working, the fight or flight, let's shut down. And you'll notice if you're in shutdown, if you tend to feel disconnected from your body, you tend to feel disconnected from your emotions. You might even have a hard time knowing what you're feeling. Some other things that you might notice is that you feel a lot of brain fog. It's really hard to think clearly. So those are some symptoms of either extreme, depending on your trauma response. And again, if you're experiencing those things, it's because the trauma is still in the body. And so establishing safety, a sense of safety, is vital to recreating your life. A lot of people get out of a traumatic relationship or a traumatic circumstance, whether it's a work circumstance, whether it's their leaving their home of origin and all the trauma that might be associated if it's a toxic environment, and they want to create their life, which is understandable, especially if someone else stole so much of your life in so many years because of the dynamics that they created. And they start wanting to see a change on the outside. They start wanting to see their goals being accomplished. They want to create their external world, their relationships, where they live, their home environment. And all of that is awesome. And it's definitely a part of healing. But it's also super hard to do so if you're trying to do that and you're still being flooded with the survival energy. And that's another part of trauma that's challenging to understand and accept, is the fact that your external world can be cleared free of the people that cause the toxicity, that cause the trauma, and the trauma is still inside and preventing you as if the toxic people were still there in your life. That's the power of that survival energy. So I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to make this is not like a all is lost video, but I want to talk about reality and the need to really do the inner work to get this sense of safety, to establish that sense of safety. And it's not something that happens overnight.